Well, it's 3:45 in Omaha, and this is the annual meeting of Berkshire Hathaway. It doesn't look like an annual meeting. It doesn't feel exactly like an annual meeting, and it particularly doesn't feel like an annual meeting because my partner of 60 years, Charlie Munger, is not sitting up here, and I think most of the people that come to our meeting really come to listen to Charlie. But I want to assure you, Charlie at 96 is in fine shape. His mind is as good as ever, his voice is as strong as ever, but it just didn't seem like a good idea to have him make the trip to Omaha for this meeting. But nevertheless, I want you to assure you, Charlie is in fine shape, and he'll be back next year, and we'll try to have everything in the show that we normally have next year. Now, what's, of course, on everybody's mind the last 2 months or so is, what's going to be the situation in terms of health in the United States, and what's going to be the situation in terms of the economy in the United States in the months and perhaps the years to come. In 2008 and 9, our economic train went off the tracks. And there were some reasons why the roadbed was weak in terms of the banks and all of that sort of thing. But the train went. This time we just pulled the train off the tracks and put it on a siding. And I don't really know of any parallel in terms of a very, very, well, the most important country in the world, most productive, huge population, in effect, sidelining its economy and its workforce. But even facing that, I would like to talk to you about the economic future of the country, because I remain convinced, as I was convinced of this in World War II. I was convinced of it during the Cuban Missile Crisis, 9/11, the financial crisis, that nothing could basically stop America. And we've faced great problems in the past. We haven't faced this exact problem. In fact, we haven't really faced anything that even quite resembles this problem. But we faced tougher problems, and the American miracle, the American magic, has always prevailed, and it will do so again. And we found that nothing can stop America when you get right down to it. And it's been true all along. It may have been interrupted with the scariest of scenarios, when you had a war with one group of states fighting another group of states. And it may have been tested again in the Great Depression, and it may be tested now to some degree. But in the end, the answer is never bet against America. I don't believe anybody knows what the market is going to do tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I know America is going to move forward over time, but I don't know for sure. And we learned this on September 10th, 2001, and we learned it a few months ago in terms of the virus. Anything can happen in terms of markets. And if you can bet on America, but you have to be careful about how you bet, because simply because markets can do anything, you just don't know what's going to happen. You know at least in my view, you know that America's tailwind is not exhausted. Equities are going to outperform that bond. They're going to outperform Treasury bills. They're going to outperform that money you've stuck under your mattress. I mean, they are a enormously sound investment as long as they're an investment and they're not a gambling device or something that you think you can safely, buy on margin or whatever it may be. The American tailwind is marvelous. American business represents, and it's going to have interruptions, and you're not going to foresee the interruptions, and you do not want to get yourself in a position where those interruptions can affect you, either because you're leveraged or because you're psychologically unable to handle looking at a bunch of numbers. I'm not saying that this is the right time to buy stocks. If you mean by right that they're going to go up instead of down, I don't know what they're going to go in the next day or week or month or year. But I hope I know enough to know. Well, I think I can buy a cross-section and do fine over 20 or 30 years. And you may think that's kind of for a guy 89, that's taking kind of an optimistic viewpoint. But I hope that really everybody would buy stocks with the idea that they're buying partnerships and businesses, and they wouldn't look at them as chips to move around up or down. You'll see in the month of April that we net sold $6 billion or so of securities, and that isn't because we thought the stock market was going to go down or anything of the sort, or because somebody changes their target price or they change this year's earnings forecast. I just decided that I'd made a mistake in evaluating. It was an understandable mistake. It was a probability-weighted decision when we bought that we were getting an attractive amount for our money when investing across the airlines business. So we bought roughly 10% of the 4 largest airlines, and we probably, this is not 100% of what we did in April, but we probably paid $7 or $8 billion, somewhere between $7 and $8 billion, to own 10% of the 4 large companies in the airline business, and it turned out I was wrong about that business because of something that was not in any way the fault of 4 excellent CEOs. I mean, believe me, no joy being a CEO of an airline, but the companies we bought were well managed. They did a lot of things right. It's a very, very, very difficult business because you're dealing with millions of people every day, and if something goes wrong for 1% of them, they are very unhappy. So I don't envy anybody the job of being CEO of an airline, but I particularly don't enjoy them being in a period like this where essentially nobody, and people have been told basically not to fly. I've been told not to fly for a while. I'm looking forward to flying. I may not fly commercial, but that's another question. But the airline business, and I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think it changed in a very major way, and it's obviously changed in the fact that the 4 companies are each going to borrow, perhaps an average of at least 10 or 12 billion each. Well, you have to pay that back out of earnings over some period of time. I mean, you're 10 or 12 billion dollars worse off if that happens, and of course, in some cases, they're having to sell stock or sell the right to buy a stock at these prices, and that takes away from the upside down. And I don't know whether 2 or 3 years from now that as many people will fly as many passenger miles as they did last year. They may and they may not. But the future is much less clear to me about how the business will turn out through absolutely no fault of the airlines themselves. But something that was a low probability event happened, and it happened to hurt particularly, whether it's the travel business, the hotel business, the cruise business, the theme park business, but the airline business in particular. And of course, the airline business has the problem that if the business comes back 70% or 80%, the aircraft don't disappear. So you've got too many planes, and it didn't look that way when the orders were placed a few months ago, or when arrangements were made. But the world changed for airlines, and I wish them well.
Which areas of our operations have already been hardest hit or will be by the coronavirus pandemic, and what are the implications for the continued employment of those people?
I'll put it this way: 5 years from now, I think Berkshire will be employing considerably more people, and I don't see where we'll have large dips. But the virus could take off in certain ways that in some of our manufacturing businesses, for example, the demand could be dramatically reduced, and in those cases we would have layoffs at some point.
This one's from Andrew Wenke. He says, can you ask Warren why he didn't repurchase Berkshire shares in March when they dropped to a price that was 30% lower than the price that he had repurchased shares for in January and February?
Yeah, it was very, very, very short period where they were 30% less. But I don't think Berkshire shares relative to present value are at a significantly different discount than they were when we were paying somewhat higher prices. I mean, it's like Keynes said, or whoever it was, if the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? We always think about it, but I don't feel that it's far more compelling to buy Berkshire shares now than I would have felt 3 months or 6 months or 9 months ago. It's always a possibility, and we'll see what happens. And Becky, I would just say again that we may have. I hope we don't, but we may get some unpleasant surprises. And we're dealing with a virus that spreads its wings in a certain way, in very unpredictable ways, and how Americans react to it. There's all kinds of possibilities, but I definitely come to the conclusion after weighing all that sort of stuff, never bet against America. So thanks.